and welcome to another episode of Read and Write with Natasha. I have with me today Veronica Kirin, who's an award winning entrepreneur and author. She is the founder of Asterisk DAO and co founder of Anodyne magazine. She's also the author of the award winning book Stories of Elders and creator of the Stories of COVID research, which documents the pandemic in real time. She's been named a Forbes Next 1000 Entrepreneur and BEQ 40 LGBTQ Leaders Under 40 and has spoken at two TEDx events. Hi, Veronica. Thank you for joining me today.
Hi, Natasha. Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to talk about books and reading and publishing and writing and entrepreneurship.
Yeah, me too. You have a very impressive resume. So I think my first question is, what is an entrepreneur?
Yeah, I love it. So my background and my area of study is actually in anthropology.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious about people. Big surprise. I became an entrepreneur with that. But my actual area of expertise within anthropology is paradigm shifts. So that's why you see me researching
Mm.
things like the high tech revolution and COVID-19, and then starting a business to shift the paradigm of women's non reproductive health with Asterisk.
Okay, so paradigm shift. So, how do you define paradigm shift? Is someone quitting their 9 to 5 job and trying like me being an entrepreneur? Is that considered a paradigm shift?
Absolutely. So, paradigm shift is a major change within one's reality. Typically, it is preempted by a crisis, and
Mm,
then we either use the crisis as a jumping off point or not, and then we become consumed by the crisis rather than using the crisis. So COVID was a really amazing example for me because first of all, it was global. So like I was the subject matter in addition to being the interviewer and researcher. But it was a complete crisis. And we had these two groups of people. We had people who were trying to take advantage of the crisis, not to take advantage of people, but just to say, okay, I'm learning something here. I'm realizing I don't want to go to work anymore, or I've been working too hard, or I don't see my family, or I actually always wanted to be a writer and I didn't know it until I had this break, right? We had all these
yeah,
moments. And
yeah,
then we also had people who were in the other side of it who allowed themselves to be taken by the crisis and to fight
correct.
it and to really hate it and be angry. And so we saw two different outcomes with that as well. But
Yeah,
crises can be self-imposed as well, like you said, quitting the job, going into something new. It's still a crisis. You still have to shift your identity, shift your habits, change who you are, and
yeah.
start anew.
Yeah, I mean, many people that I interviewed here on this podcast, I can't tell you how many told me, well, during the pandemic, I started writing a book, or during the pandemic, I started the podcast,
Right.
or like I started the podcast during the pandemic, for example.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's fascinating because some people, like the pandemic, they got darker, they got depressed, the world
Mm-hmm.
is ending, while others took it as an extra time that they have that they wanted to invest
Right.
in. So it's interesting. So recently I read this term, like, which is, instead of post traumatic stress, they call it post traumatic growth. And I was wondering if they're like, now after the pandemic, is like people who either had a PTSD another PTS, I
G.
guess G. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that's a
that's
way to frame it.
yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to talk about your publishing route. So you published these books. One of them is, you documented what happened to people during COVID. Is that what the book about? If you can tell us a bit about it.
Yeah, so actually, Stories of COVID is not yet published. It's still
Okay.
in data analysis. We did so much more work. There was just such a greater body of data and interviews that I brought in for that project compared to Stories of Elders that it's still taking me time to process through.
Okay.
And I'm actually in the process of like typical writer experience, like applying for grants and trying to get support in order to make sure that I can,
Yeah.
do it the right way because. it wasn't just one easy group of people. I went as far as I could for diversity, and so I need to really honor that. Whereas Stories of Elders was only people in the United States and only people who identify within the greatest generation, so born before 1945. And
Okay.
so while I went for ethnically diverse because I wanted a fair subset of the American people, it was still American. It was still a specific age group. And so it was a lot
Okay.
easier to do data analysis. And it was a much more targeted approach, which was the hydro revolution. That's what I was looking at. Whereas we didn't really
Okay.
know what was going to happen with COVID. So I didn't have as targeted an approach. So yeah, Stories of
Uh,
Elders was published in 2018. I did a TED Talk for it in 2019. It won 2 awards in 2020, and the documentary also won an award in 2020. So it
congrats.
kind of kept like living. I'm currently talking to my alma mater right now about coming back and doing a course on it. Um, and so it just has life because I think, what we were talking about with paradigm shifts, and especially ones that take place generationally, right? There's this curiosity that continues to exist around the high tech revolution and what it all really means. We try to assign meaning to it because it somehow helps us feel better. And so the body of work continues to have life, even though it's technically an old book.
So I just wanna ask you about the COVID book. One of the things, like I read a number of COVID books, and part of me, maybe I have a PTSD. I was like, I don't think I'm ready for this. Like I felt it
Mm,
was too soon.
mhm.
It brought back some memories of maybe fear and being stuck at home with 3 kids, no school, all of that. And do you think people are ready for? But that was my experience. People might have different
Yeah.
experiences. But so now like I try to avoid anything related to COVID. It's like I want to block this time. Although there was some growth, but for me personally, with 3 kids stuck at home and worried about their health and all of that, it was a hard time. So do you
Yeah.
think people are ready to read books about COVID now?
I think everyone has a different readiness or a different approach. There are people who will
Hmm.
never want to talk about it again. There are people who won't stop talking about it. It's so healing for them to continue to digest and communicate. And so I don't want to say, like, are people ready for it? Everyone's different.
Okay.
We all had
Okay.
different experiences with COVID too. Like, I don't have kids. My experience of
Yeah.
COVID was as somebody who's child free, uh, and moved across the country in the middle of it, and then moved across the
Um.
world in the middle of it. So like
Mm,
different challenges affected our brains differently. Income status affected our experience differently. There's so many factors, right? So are
mm.
you ready for it? I don't know, but I do think perspective, as they say, hindsight is 2020. I think the perspective of time is very important with regards to this area of research.
Hmm. So, how did you publish your books? I mean, the first and the second one. Did you get an agent? Did you self-publish? What was your publishing journey?
So I also have had many podcasts as an entrepreneur,
Okay. Okay.
and my co-host thought that a particular publisher was going to be a good fit for me, and he has that talent. Like some people just have the talent for
Okay.
connecting others. And so
Okay.
he said, "You, publisher person, be our guest. Meet Veronica. Here you go." And then that publisher flew out to meet me and to discuss the book further for Stories of Elders.
Oh.
And the next week we signed a contract. So it was an agentless publication with a boutique publisher that specializes in nonfiction that is unique in some way, that it's just unconventional in some manner, which mine was. It was a first of its kind study. Stories of COVID, again, it's yet unpublished. I am now agented though, so
Ah.
I'm heading in a little bit more of a traditional route. Shout out to PS Literary, and so we're working on it again, trying to find that the right voice for it, which is going to emerge as the data analysis completes. We're halfway through. And so like what's emerging out of it, right, as we go through the data will then determine what's the angle, what's the point, what did we learn, and then that translates
Okay.
to how sellable it is to a traditional publisher.
Wow. So one of the things that I talk to authors, inspiring authors all the time. Like sometimes I record 3 or 4 episodes a week, and one of the things that they tell me, I don't see the gray hair. No, but when
I'm like, you get to hang out with authors all the time.
I know, but it's a lot of work. But but at the same time, the number one thing that they say is the querying and finding an agent. It's such a long, frustrating process that maybe 80% of them just gave up on that process completely and went the route of the self-publishing or going with small press, or even hybrid publishing where they actually have to pay money out of pocket. So how did you find your agent? What's your secret? Tell us the secret. Yeah.
I don't think I have a good story, and that's because I landed my agent in 6 days.
Oh wow. Okay. Well, no, you should be
So
proud of it. You should be proud. So tell us. Yeah.
I queried, I think 15 agents, and I got
Okay.
2 very hungry responses. Like, yes, we're so excited, and I was so torn. To this day, I think living on a razor's edge. Like you can just see like your life went like this, and like
Oh
that
wow.
decision. Whereas sometimes you meet someone, you're just like, I can tell that you're not right for me, right?
Yeah.
But like I had
Yeah.
these 2 incredible agents who both were like, I really want to represent your work, and it was a really hard decision.
Oh
But that's
wow.
what took the longest. Like I think it took me 2 months to put together the proposal, like to really put together a really
Okay.
good proposal. It was 25,000 words when I was done with it.
Okay.
Um, and it was for nonfiction. So a little bit of a cheat. Like with nonfiction, you don't have to have the entire book completed.
Yeah.
Whereas with
Yeah.
fiction, you need the whole thing and it needs to be polished. We all know the
Yeah.
story. Well, maybe not all of us, but the story of Stig Larsson, right? Like he submitted the manuscript for what we know as Girl with a Dragon
Dragon
Tattoo.
tattoo.
The
Yeah.
original title is Men Who Hate Women, which I think is a better title.
Yeah. Me too. Yeah.
Title.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like with the theme that's in the book, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
he submitted that. The agent read it in a night, right? This was it 700 words, 1,000 words book, read it in a night, immediately, yes, immediately publishable, right?
I didn't know that story.
Yeah,
Oh wow.
yeah. And he worked on that story for 10 years.
And the agent responded the same day, the next day.
I think he sent it straight to the editor, and they said yes immediately.
Oh wow.
Yes.
Wow.
It was that, but so that's the difference between fiction and nonfiction, where like you have to have in fiction the perfect, completed, polished manuscript, especially these days where editors are not, they're not the heroes like they were, before the year 2000. But so for me, I queried on nonfiction. I do have fiction in me. It's just not, it's just been in short stories so far. So.
And that was for the COVID book, right? That's the one
No,
with
it's
the
actually for a book that is not yet out yet.
Are you gonna tell us about it? Is that a secret?
I think I will hold on to that just a little longer because we don't have a publisher who said yes yet.
Okay, all right. So, what was like the hook in your query letter that attracted the agent so quickly? Was it the theme, or is it how you phrased it? Like, what are your tips for writing a query that would get you that fast of a response?
Well, like, so you and I both know this language of like blue ocean, right? Like,
Yeah.
we're in entrepreneurship. People talk about blue ocean marketing and blah, blah, blah. And like blue oceans don't exist. So the idea is that within marketing that a blue ocean is super clean, super empty, whereas a red ocean is red because all the sharks have come in and they're like eating each other and it's a frenzy. Yeah. So like right now, red ocean would be like starting a shoe company. It's like, okay, Adidas, Nike, New Balance, like they all have the market now. It'd be so hard to enter.
Yeah.
Whereas if you were to go maybe 5 years ago, the blue ocean would have been ride sharing, right?
Yeah.
Uber. And like that's why Uber made such a splash. There was no one doing it.
No one. Yeah.
And so the blue ocean that I found within my query, which remains to be true with the manuscript that I'm trying to sell right now, is um, getting my body of work as an entrepreneur listened to by both men and women. So like
Mm,
there are not people writing books the way that the type of book that I'm writing. Uh, 80 to 90% of the voices are men, and so that's the hook.
okay, okay, got it. So, okay, so you're an entrepreneur focused on mostly on anthropology, and that hence, so you coined actually the term, right? Entrepreneur.
Entrepreneur.
That you
Yeah,
coined
no,
that term. Okay.
I actually am not mostly focused on anthropology. I would call that like my nightlife.
Okay. What's your
um,
day life?
my day life for many years was in a web development tech company.
Mm,
I sold that a few years ago, right when I published my first book, actually, so that I could go on the road and really focus on that. And then consulting for the past several years. And now I am the founder of a Web3 company, Asterisk, so in blockchain, trying to change how women's non reproductive health is done around the world. As well as Anodyne magazine. So we're publishing stories and artwork on the topic of Flinta health. So basically, women and queer people health experiences.
Flenta Health. I don't know what that is.
Flinta, yep. So Flinta is an acronym that basically is women and queer people. It's female, lesbian, intersex, non-binary, trans, and agendered.
Okay. And do you hire freelancers or do you do the writing yourself for the
No, no,
magazine?
no. So it's a literary and arts magazine. So we're getting
Ah,
poetry, short
poetry.
stories,
Okay,
flash
okay.
fiction, artwork, photography, music. We have a very
Okay.
diverse subset of
Good to
genres
know.
that we
So
work
if
with.
anyone is listening and they want to submit, they can submit. Okay,
Yes,
that's good.
please.
Okay,
Yep,
that's good
on the
to know.
topic of health, and if you identify as Flinta, yeah,
Okay. Okay.
yeah.
So, okay, I want to shift gears a bit and ask
Okay.
you about entrepreneurship and hustle culture and all of that. So I call myself as an authorpreneur because I'm an author, a writer. I make living from writing, whether it's writing books or writing content for clients like blogs, newsletters. I don't make any money from the podcast. But what I make money is from just providing content.
Hmm.
And I personally, like, to be completely transparent, I struggle with making ends meet as a, so like sometimes I joke I am like a starving artist, but this is the route that I chose and I'm willing to stick with it. And hence
Hmm.
for me, hustle is a good thing. Like, I'm a hustler, I'm an immigrant. That's what we do. I want to hustle, hustle, hustle to get the next client, to get the next sponsorship. But then lately I noticed it, and I also noticed it a bit in your bio, is that there's kind of shift against the hustle culture. And I was like, why? I thought hustle is a good thing. You need to hustle. So I want to hear the other perspective. Why are you kind of against the hustle culture?
Yeah, a couple different reasons. Hustle is not, as you said, a bad thing when it's from one's own motivation.
Okay.
But in entrepreneurship, there's a rhetoric that hustling is the only way.
Okay.
Um, and in fact, that's entrepreneurship done wrong, in my opinion.
Okay.
I got my previous business down to 10 hours a week before I sold it, above six figures.
10 hours.
And
Okay.
so that's entrepreneurship done right. When you know how to scale a business, you are able to reduce your hours and your time and have a life of freedom or choose to work how much you want. Remember, like, we're talking about choice here. So hustling, if you love hustling, if you love beating the pavement, fantastic. But if you feel like you have to hustle because you won't make money if you don't, that's not healthy. That's just
Mm,
a different form of the shackles that we wore at the 9 to 5. The people
interesting.
who do really well in business, they're not working like that. They are absolutely. After a few years drinking Mai Tais on the beach, buying yachts, blah, 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 blah. We like to call
Mm.
that white male privilege. And it is a white man's club, but the lessons can be taken away that there are ways to do business where you don't work and work and work. And then when you get injured, all of a sudden there's nobody to work anymore. And the company goes to the ground and you don't have enough money. Or you need a break because your kids are driving you crazy. Or there's
Yeah.
a pandemic. And so what happens? So that's what I was doing consulting for the past several years before I went back and launched Asterisk and Anodyne magazine, teaching people how to get out of hustle culture if they want to.
Okay. I think everyone wants to drink mojitos on the beach, eventually. I think who doesn't want to pina colada.
Mhm.
But in order to get to that level of success, don't you have to hustle before it? Like, the concept of, let's say, the 4-hour week by Tim Ferriss or all of that. In
Right.
order to automate these systems that he talks about, or having a business that scales, you have to hustle to get there. Isn't that true?
Depends how you define hustle, but I would
Okay.
define hustle as a sprint. It shouldn't be the marathon. You can't sprint for a whole marathon, right?
Correct.
So
Yeah.
yeah, the starting up a business often takes some hustle. Although if I were to start a content marketing company again, which we had a department at my company that I sold, so doing similar to work to you, I never wrote the articles. Never, not once did I write the articles in my company. I always had people doing that for me from day one.
Mm.
And so if I were to start it again, I would start by, I guess you could define the hustle as finding the people who are going to write the articles and then finding the clients, but maybe doing so through strategic partnerships, so I didn't have to work as hard in order to find those
Mm.
clients first.
Interesting. Okay, so let's do this on air. I'm an. You're gonna give me an advice for free here. You ready? So I'm an authorpreneur. I'm
Mm-hmm.
struggling to make ends meet, and I'm sure many people who are listening, they're in the same position. And I come to you and I tell you, how do I scale my business, my one woman business
Mm-hmm.
of authorpreneur, and that includes publishing books, writing for clients. So it's not everything like creative working, but I also provide content. How do I scale it where I don't have to keep looking for the next client, or I have to do extra gigs on the side, or some of the people I talk to, they try to find part-time jobs. Like I'm married, so my husband, takes care of a lot of the bills. So I'm, let's say, privileged in that sense, but not everyone in that position. So what would you tell someone?
Yeah.
How can they reach that level of drinking pina colada on the beach?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, when I work with clients, I'm deep inside the business. I want to look at the
Okay.
business plan first. And
Okay.
usually I say, "Do you have a business plan?" And they say,
No.
"Right."
Because
So
okay,
where's the
yeah,
strategy? If there's no business
yeah.
plan, then where's the strategy? Right? And then
It's
how
a
are we going to
rough
transition?
strategy. Rough
Right,
strategy.
right, exactly. And so
Okay.
then there's always that spinning the wheels. And
Yeah.
so for me, I want to look at strategy, systems, and yes, automation, like Tim Ferriss talks about, but it's not just only about automation. There needs to
Okay.
be this basis, this foundation of strategy that's leading you forward always. And the other thing is, I think that like a hustle culture unfortunately leads us to is this kind of like solopreneur ideal,
Correct.
um, which is a false ideal. You
Ah.
can't you can't have success ever in any respect alone, ever. I'm not talking about
Ah.
employees. I just mean in general. Like you literally cannot have success alone.
Mm.
And so, you've got this podcast, you're meeting people and building your network all the time. How are you leveraging that network? Right? Like we're spending time together, we're going deep and intimate. How are we going to stay in contact? What's your strategy that way? And I
It's a
actually have
good
like
point.
courses built out for this in order to teach people, because now I've transitioned to
Uh,
running other businesses, but I still have this knowledge. And I think it's so, so, so important that there's this false
mm.
paradigm of solopreneurship and hustling until you die. Whereas I think we all just want to hustle for a short time and then have some peace about the finances and about the future. Um,
So how do you
so
think I should stay in touch with you? The way I do it is kind of very basic. I just follow them on social media, and every once in
and
a
where's your
while I comment.
reminders? How are you reminded to follow up with somebody? In 6 months, will you reconnect?
Mm, it depends.
Right.
If the algorithm shows me their stuff and I like it,
Right.
I would like it on Instagram or something. That's
Right.
it,
Right. And
honestly.
that's not going to do
But
anything for your business.
I mean, like, I'm kind of torn. Shall I add them to my newsletter, or is that an imposition, or do I have to ask for permission to add to my news? Like all of that stuff, I don't, quote unquote, I don't have a strategy. I don't. I mean,
Always ask. Yeah, and you
yeah,
need a strategy. So for
yeah.
me, I never let my clients go away until they're using a CRM or a client relationship manager that is super robust. My client relationship manager, I use Close, spelled with a Z. I'm
Mm,
not affiliate. They don't even have an affiliate program. So this is just all me.
okay.
But your client relationship manager should not just like gather all the data on the people that you want to stay in contact with. It should also remind you to contact them. And you should be able to
Ah,
titrate how often you want to stay in contact with the different segments within your CRM. So for me, for people who I've done something like this with, yeah, this is the publicity category
yeah,
in
yeah,
my CRM, right? So I have it set to, I believe, every 6 months, because if I keep in touch with you more than that, it might start to get weird. But I'll
yeah.
take notes. What did we talk about? What did we learn? What was important during this conversation that then I can refer back to? Who can I connect Natasha to? How can I be a resource for her? And then that starts to engender trust and community and connection and builds more of a
Ah,
foundation for our relationship. And now you can
it's
be doing
true.
that with literally every single person you interview, and then using that to either reach your next publisher or to find your next client or to find your next employee, even, or to find the next place you want to go on vacation.
That's true. I mean, I've been thinking about it. Like, I have so many connections now in the publishing world and publishers, and I was like, I'm very happy, but I haven't thought about it. I was like, maybe sometime we can, but like. I many opportunities came from the podcast, but it was not in a strategic manner. It was just came, because I interviewed this person or something like that. But it's
Right.
interesting to see, and many authors have podcasts as well that I talk to,
Yeah.
and other thing that scaling their using a crm is another way. Yeah, I mean, I see what you're saying about hustle culture, and I'm tired of it. I'm tired of the hustle culture. See the bags under my eyes. I put a lot of concealer before
Yeah,
this
I know.
interview, but I'm exhausted, to tell you the truth. And I wanna like be in a 4 hour week situation, and I think I earned it. I'm almost 50 now, and it's time
Right.
to stop hustling.
Right.
But
It's not like you didn't work hard. So we're
exactly, like
doing it.
I paid my dues. I paid my dues in the corporate world. I paid my
Right.
dues in motherhood. I paid my dues. So
Yeah.
I think the idea is, how do we teach people how to do this, especially authors who are struggling all the time? They do everything. So,
Yeah.
for example, I interviewed an author who's on a boat, which is great. I love that he lives on a boat. That's kind of the pathless path that he chose. And he's constantly hustling to pay his, I guess, nomadic lifestyle. And one of the things he was telling me that he was going to start recording audiobooks to make extra income and that's great. I think that's it. But when are we going to reach a stage where we don't have to constantly look for gigs here and there to in order to do that, to
And
sustain
he's
what
in the
we're
time
doing?
for money trap.
Yeah,
And
because
the only
you're
way he
paying
sees
for your
to make
money.
money, right? The only way he sees to make money is to spend time.
Correct, correct.
Literally, our only non-renewable resource as
It's
human
time.
beings is
Yeah,
time, and yet
yeah.
you're spending that. Right. So this is, again, that's part of the mythos of hustle culture. So I've developed a course for podcasters on how to use podcasting to scale and get more leisure in life. I've developed a course for authors specifically because I'm an author, right? But I
Yeah.
also had the privilege of being an entrepreneur first. So I thought about my book differently, and that's why, even though the book is 5 years old, that's technically old that's technically like, how are you still making money off of this book? And yet I might even be flying halfway around the world to present a course on it later on this year. Right.
Oh, wow.
So I created an entire course to help to shift the mindset. It's called the entrepreneurial author, because it's not about writing. It's about the business of being an author.
Oh,
And
nice.
then I have a free scaling course as well. And I know you didn't invite me on here to like, sell my courses, but
I want to take this course. Like, I need it. Yeah, I need, like, just the tip you told me about how to scale people who I talk to. I mean, I mean, I never thought of it. And I think that's really needed in the business of being an author, because it is a business of being an author. It's no longer it's no longer Hemingway or whatever sitting in a cabin writing alone, and you get like this huge advance and you live off it. That's no longer the case.
It's not. And I think that like people just haven't totally shifted towards that new paradigm. That, again, like I said, like your editor, unfortunately, isn't going to be the hero that you want them to be. Your publisher isn't going to be the hero that you want them to be. A lot of the sales is going to be up to you. There's a reason that, and pardon the reference, but there's a reason that in, I think it was the second 50 Shades of Grey movie. I know, I'm sorry about the reference, but seriously,
no, it's fine. It's
there's
fine.
a reason that she says
no judgment.
Yeah. In the editor meeting, like you have me at editing and writing. Like, she works at a publishing house. I'm interested, and she says in that meeting, I think that this author might be an interesting person to invest in for this publishing house. And somebody like rolls their eyes or whatever, but she's like, this guy has like, I think 100,000 Twitter followers or something.
Okay.
She's making the point that like there's a built-in following for this author. If we take his manuscript and we publish it, we're going to have more business coming in, and that proves to be true. There's a reason that is in that movie. It's true for the publishing industry today, and that's part of my course too, because I think a lot of authors kind of like freak out when they feel like they have to build a brand.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
But that's, I think circling back to your question about like, how did I land an agent? Because I'd done 2 TED Talks already, because I had published with a boutique publisher already, because I'd run a business for years and years and years, and I had fodder, right? So like, what are you going to do to build up your brand so that you can land your agent or land your publisher?
Yeah, and I'm learning from you. Like, for example, you have all of this, and you're still pitching to podcasts, and like I don't even do that. So I was like, why don't I do that?
I'm still
like
pitching to podcasts. I'm still pitching to literary magazines. I'm still pitching to magazines with essays now.
But isn't that a hustle? Isn't that a hustle?
It is a little bit of a hustle, because again, it's time spent, right?
Yeah.
But that fuels me. So when I am working right in like what I really want to be working on, which is either now my magazine or my own personal writing, like that feels very exciting to me.
Okay.
And I hear so many authors say like, oh, the rejections, and I'm like, I don't care. Like, I'm just going for it. More people know my name now, even if it's been a rejection.
Yeah.
It gives me more chances to learn how to write a better proposal every time. So yeah, I guess like to those of you who think maybe like getting an agent will like change your life, it changes things, but it also doesn't.
Okay. So how are you selling your books? Like, what are the marketing tips that you would give to others, since you're the expert? How do you, you have your, what do you think authors now in 2023 should do to sell their books? People say TikTok, whatever, but what do you think they should do? Like,
yeah, I mean, I definitely have found books on TikTok. Like, one of my favorite books I read in 2022 was Legends and Lattes. It was a viral TikTok book.
TikTok, yeah, I have it. Yeah,
I felt like, oh yeah, like just curl up with your coffee and read about coffee. It was perfect. I loved that book, and that was a NaNoWriMo.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Another book, actually, a NaNoWriMo that is super famous now is the Silo trilogy. It's now on Apple TV. I discovered the trilogy when I was in lockdown and the pandemic, and couldn't believe it was a NaNoWriMo. And then it got picked up by, I believe, Simon Schuster. And then he sold the rights to Universal. And then 3 years later, here we are, Apple TV.
The Silo. It's called
Like
the Silo. Ah,
the
okay.
Silo trilogy,
Okay.
dystopian,
Okay.
post-apocalyptic future, fun.
Okay.
So anyway, what am I talking about here? So with regards to marketing, here we are right now. Like however many listeners you've got now know about my body of work that they didn't know about it before. They're going to go look up
Yeah.
Veronica Kirin,
Yeah.
maybe.
I'll link to your work in the show notes as well.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Right? But
Yeah.
like, so this podcast guest is absolutely a valid avenue for marketing. Definitely Amazon does some of it for me. However, there's a huge myth that like once the book is up there, it's gonna like do stuff. It's not true. And in fact, your book will have no visibility unless you have at least 30 reviews. Most people don't know that.
Okay.
So do not rely on Amazon. Do not rely on Goodreads until you get those reviews built up. It's not going to help you at all. I definitely look to strategic partners. So people within the publishing space, bookstores, etc. I'm always like just kind of like checking in. How's it going? You still want to carry my book, etc. Lectures, speeches, keynotes, conferences. Yeah, I spoke at a couple conferences specific to my book this year. And then if your book is newer, one of the best kept secrets, or maybe it's not, I don't know. It was a great find for me. When your book's new, the library circuit in the United States, if you're in the United States as an author, is great and it pays. So
really?
libraries put on free events all the time, but they have a budget to bring authors in. So you'll get between $50 and $200 just for showing up and presenting your book. You get to keep the proceeds from any books you sell at the event. And then again, more people know about your books. And I've got to tell you, seeing your book with that library sticker on the binding is an absolute treat.
Yeah. It is, yeah. I also heard about book clubs as well.
Book clubs, book boxes, right? Box subscriptions.
Yeah, book of the month. But these are hard to get in. I mean,
they can be.
The submission process. Yeah. Oh wow. So, what is in store for you now? So I know you're working on the secret project. What else are you working? What else?
Yeah,
are you
I have awaiting publishers, lots of reading, lots of writing, working on Anodyne magazine. We're about to publish our first issue, so by the time this podcast comes out, the first issue will be out. We'll actually be in December. We're reopening submissions, and we're doing so trimesterly, so check back in all the time. I thought for years, like, do I want to start a magazine? Why would I start a magazine? There's so many magazines out there. What's the point? And then now being in it, it's been delightful. It's been so much fun. And then running Asterisk, really trying to, maybe it's fun, but in a different way because it's sticking it to the man, literally trying to help change the way women's health is viewed in the world. Huge mountains to climb. Enormous mountain to climb.
Yeah, especially now with what's going on with the U.S. and all the debate. I don't take any stand on. I stay out of politics on this podcast, but let's say it's a very heated debate at the moment.
Well, in my opinion, women's bodies should not be political. Period. It's fine.
Yeah.
I'm
True.
an animal. Right? Why are we talking about it from this perspective? Is my life as valuable as yours? Yes.
Yeah.
End of conversation.
Exactly. Yeah. So, okay. You are in Germany now. Do you know, like, if you can share with us, did you move there because for work reasons, personal reasons, or just you wanted to experience a different lifestyle? I'm always curious about people who move countries. I think, as you can tell from my accent, that I live in the US, but I lived in different parts of the world. I was born elsewhere, and so I'm always curious about people who travel, cross continent. So what was your experience?
Yeah, I gotta say, moving during a pandemic is a very interesting time to move.
Okay.
In some ways, it made it easier because there was less to contend with. Like, there weren't very many people traveling. When we arrived to Berlin, there was nothing to do, and so in a way, the culture shock was reduced because there just wasn't a lot of exposure.
why did you move in the first place from the
Yeah,
US?
yeah.
Yeah.
So honestly, we were getting, I mean, we don't want to be political on the show, but we were getting really afraid for our lives and existence as queer people in the United States.
Okay.
Me in particular, as a woman in the United States,
Okay.
access to healthcare was becoming a major issue.
Okay.
So it was a little bit of bodily safety, mismatch of values, concerns for outcome and well-being, and then just simply looking towards opportunities that we really wanted.
Okay.
So we're
And
very happy here.
how is life in Germany?
Yeah,
As an
Berlin is,
author, as an, as a
yeah,
entrepreneur, how are you managing all of
these are great
that?
questions. So I do want to preface to say that like Berlin is very different than Germany.
Yeah, I heard
So
that. I really want to visit Berlin. Yeah. I heard
yeah,
Berlin is really nice. Yeah.
it's absolutely insane here.
Yeah.
So, pick your flavor, pick your poison. It's all here. When I
Okay.
have people visit me, I ask them, like, what do you enjoy? Because
Okay.
it's all here. Anything you want, anything you want is here.
Okay.
So when they ask me, what do we do? It's like, well, I can't even begin to define what we're going to do until I know
Well,
what
yeah.
you like to do when you travel.
Yeah.
Berlin is the entrepreneurial capital of Europe.
Mm.
So,
Okay.
the funds are flowing here. It's especially good for tech companies. There's meetups, there's events, there's conferences. There's so many blockchain conferences I can't even keep up, just in Berlin, let alone across Europe.
Okay.
My partner's also in tech, and landed the job within a month
Oh
of
wow.
beginning the search. I really encourage people who feel like they want to explore a new lifestyle or maybe security to come on over, especially if they're in the tech scene or entrepreneurial scene. Berlin just has so much to offer in that way. And I mean, the job security is amazing here, let alone the work-life balance, which is mandated by law. So we love it. We absolutely love it. And I don't see us leaving
Oh,
anytime soon.
great. Well, I'm
Yeah.
happy to hear it. So any final thoughts, tips? How can people find you if you wanna, know about like submit to your magazine, maybe take one of your courses, buy your books? How can they find you?
The easiest way to find me is just to go to my website, veronicakirin.com, which I know Natasha will spell it in the show notes for you. If you know about Kirin beer, then you know how to spell my last name. If you don't,
Yeah.
then you might be clueless. Honestly, like, yeah, Anodyne is there. My courses are there. Asterisk is there. So if anything I've mentioned stirs your fancy, it's all there, as well as all my social media. So if you're just like curious to follow this really wild woman, feel free. I'm on all of the things, except for Snapchat. Like I'm on Snapchat, but I haven't posted in probably 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
So you won't
Okay.
see me there.
Okay. Ah, fun.
Yeah.
And last question: how do you think I should stay connected to you? As you said, what shall I do?
Yeah.
How do I make sure we still connected?
Yeah, well, I'm actually really curious. First of all, easy first connection is like, hey, you're not publishing this podcast for another few months, as you said. So the timeline is long, which means there's a natural reconnection point for
Correct.
us.
Ah. Hmm.
And then from there, like, there should be an update at that point, like a question from you: what's going on in Veronica's life? Do any of the show notes need to change? And then also that gives me the opportunity to hear a little bit more about you and what's been going on in Natasha's life. It should be a natural part of the conversation. And then from there, I would definitely find a CRM that helps to remind you to reconnect with your various guests so that you keep that wheel turning, to keep your relationship warm. Because there's going to be a time when you want to reach out. And I've got to tell you, it's happened to me plenty of times where I look in my address book and like that person would be the perfect person to reach out to, but I haven't talked to them in 2 years. And so it feels really awkward. So I don't reach out to them,
Okay.
So just because I've been on your show, if it's 2 years from now, I might not remember very well. So if you reach out to me more in between, and then you have a real ask, right? Then you're much more likely to have
I'll keep harassing you on social media. It's
not, and I gotta say, a lot of entrepreneurs think social media is where it's at. That's one marketing channel out of the available 19. So don't rely on social media alone.
Available 19. Ah, you have a number. Okay, that's good to know. I have to take that course then. Okay, all right. Thank you so much, Veronica. It's been amazing, inspiring, and I learned a lot. And I'm sure anyone who's listening or watching is going to learn a lot from this. And let's stay in touch, of course. And for anyone who's listening or watching, thank you for joining us today. And until we meet again. How do I stop this?